Well, we're going to try it again. Last week, we had a great main topic, but we got so involved in the news that we got stuck there. This week, we're going to just dip our toes in the news, and then we're really going to jump into our main topic, and that is religion and technology. How has technology changed religion? How is religion perhaps impacting our uses of technology? I have an amazing panel today. We'll see you in a few minutes. Actually, how about right now on the rundown? Oh my goodness, it's good to see all of you. Welcome to the rundown. I have some amazing, amazing people here today. First and foremost, my dear friend Tamra, who's out in LA. How are you today?
I am good. Things are starting to calm down a little bit, but we're not out of the woods yet. And now we're seeing the start of people kind of doing the recovery phase, which is going to take a bit.
Wow. It just came across my feed actually that there's a huge concert on January 30th. Oh goodness, I'm not going to remember the name of it now, but Green Day is performing and Stevie Wonder, like all these cool, Earth, Wind and Fire or Kool and the Gang, like all these amazing musicians to raise funds for California's, LA's rebuilding. So
Yeah, we're
fantastic.
starting to see a lot of that. This is like the best of humanity when they come together and really support people. And we see that all across the city.
And you know what else I just saw? There was a report out of Israel that you may have heard of the Iron Dome, which is one of the tools that Israel created with a lot of help from, certainly financial help from America, to protect Israel. It essentially shoots rockets, incoming rockets out of the sky. It's kind of amazing. So there's a company in Israel that's creating something called Fire Dome, which essentially uses similar technology to stop fires, right? So it uses AI and different technologies where if it sees a little fire starting, it can just deploy there, and it has capsules that whatever. I didn't fully understand it, but it was fascinating technology, and something that we sorely need.
Well, I think we'll just see it too in the change in how we build structures in areas that were not really meant to have structures in them.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I think we're going to see a lot of technology come into play.
Absolutely. And coming back for a second week, hello, Sky. Good to see you now. Sky,
David.
You are coming in from the perfect spot today. Where are you?
Well, I am inside the facility where people gather on Sunday morning. I'm specifically in a library that some people of the people group said we need to gather books about certain topics and collect them.
I thought you were in church.
Curate them. Well, I am.
Oh, you are? Okay.
But this church has a library.
Well, okay, well, that's fine. But the important part is you're at church, and we're talking about religion today.
I've got a worship and arts meeting in 27 minutes.
All right, we got to go.
I mean,
I'm
out of here at 7.
All right, you got it. We got to go. Look at this, my friends. Look who's here, Mr. Tony Mobley, the host of Conversation with Tony Mobley. Tony, it is so nice to see you here. How are you today, sir?
I am great, David. I'm glad to be here. Excited about this conversation.
Now, you are a man of faith. You do a tremendous amount of work with your church, I know.
Yes, I do. I'm kind of excited about this conversation. We just finished our Bible study, and so I told him that I was going to leave a little bit early, but I didn't have to leave early, so I was able to come in actually a little bit early for this conversation.
Good.
So I have some things that I'm going to share when it's appropriate.
Good. Beautiful. I'm glad to have you here. Glad to have you here. Dave, how are you, sir?
I'm pretty good. We got a blizzard going on out here. It's been about 10 years since we had a real blizzard.
Wow.
And today the 90-mile-an-hour winds, which didn't bring fire, but they brought moisture.
Oh, my goodness. You're staying warm, I hope.
Actually, our houses are built for this, so I'm quite cozy.
Good. Good. I'm so happy to see you, Dave. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to this conversation too. I spent 2 weeks waiting for this.
I
so
know we all did. We all did. So did my friend Leo Mindell from across the pond. Leo, how are you, sir?
Very well, very well. Back in London after traveling. I was last week in Italy when I joined in.
Beautiful.
So
Now,
back in London now.
Quickly, Leo, my knowledge of your work in technology has only been in sort of the religious realm, but that's not all. I mean, that's not your main gig, right? It's the religious stuff.
It is now.
Oh, it is now.
It is my main gig now. But I used to be in websites for world governing bodies in sport. So I used to do a lot of websites and everything for the Olympics and things like that before what I do now.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
All right. Fantastic. Well, we have a really, really wonderful group of people here today. I'm very excited to have all of them here. Let's, we got one news story we want to talk about. Just one news story we want to talk about. And we'll get into it in a second. Let's talk news. So it's probably not going to come as a surprise that the one thing that I really wanted to just check in with everyone about is we are tick-tocking down to the TikTok ban. And even today, so much has happened. And there is a broader question or broader questions about this also. I am timing us. I'm giving us like 10 minutes on this. All right. That's it. Here's the latest. The latest is we knew already that President-elect Trump wanted to squash this. He does not want it to go into effect. We now know that President Biden is also trying to figure out a way to get this to not go into effect. Interestingly, ByteDance or TikTok, they really had three options. One option was to sell, and everybody from Mr. Beast to Elon Musk has offered to buy it. One option is to sell, which they have indicated they have no interest in doing. The other option is to go dark, which is what they're talking about happening on Sunday. The third option was to do nothing. And if they do nothing, we could all still continue to use TikTok, but no one will be able to download it anymore, and we won't be able to get updates. So one part of the story that I find fascinating is this whole discussion about what's going to happen. But the other piece is what's happening on TikTok and around TikTok since we have been counting down. And Tamara, you found some amazing resources, and I've been watching some. It seems like every video on TikTok now is the farewell video.
Right.
Don't worry, everyone. I'm not leaving social media. And how many of them are jumping over to what's it called?
It's called Red Note. Within a 24-hour period, Red Note became the #1 downloaded app. And I have to say, I'm like, all right, I'll try. I went to look at it and then I was like, I did not download it because when I got to it, I was like, well, this is all in Chinese. Like you had to actually learn how to download it and how to change it into your language. I was like,
oh, wow.
If there is something sketch about this,
like 600,000 people
Absolutely.
or something like that signed up for Reddit. And by the way, that's only one. There's also, what's it? Pineapple, banana. It's like a fruit.
There's a couple of them, but I think Red Note's the most notable because collectively as a whole, everybody said we are not going to an American company. We actually don't care whatever is this fear that we are supposed to have. You didn't give us enough information. And a lot of them said, hey, look, this is my community. I have built a life here with people that I care about, and it's my income is being affected and all of these things. But they basically said, I'm a little guy that can take my information. I'll hand it to them willingly. And then they started kind of comparing with, y'all couldn't get together on gun control. You couldn't get together on, all of these different things. And this is the battle that you all managed to agree on. And it's just not sitting well with the people on TikTok.
I also think that those people on TikTok are, for the first time, making it super clear that the creator economy is a real thing, and it's a powerful force. It's so powerful that they are possibly going to get a law that was passed, as you said, by many, many, many members, bipartisan members of Congress, was signed into law by the president, was not overturned when the Supreme Court had an opportunity to overturn it. The creator economy and creators are powerful enough to potentially change the direction of what's happening here. And that's something.
I think part of it too is how the law was done. Just like many things that get passed in our country, they're attached to other things that need to get passed, and then they're part of this rider of things. So now that's also coming into play, and it speaks to the things we do and don't know about how laws get passed in our country, right? That is something we learned in high school, but we don't really think about it, and we don't really understand that when you have a 900-page document, there's lots of stuff all the time that gets made into law because voting against it is not a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Are any of you on TikTok? I'm curious.
I am, obviously.
Tony is. Dave, you're not. I am. Sky, you're not. Leo, you're not.
Of all the addictions I have, this is not one of them. And you just talk about laws and looking at history. There was a thing called prohibition, but I can now still go down to my grocery store and buy a fifth of something. I know different parts of Canada, you still have to go into a specific store, but life's ups and downs and how we legislate and litigate. Look, we're living in the middle of history being made.
We are. You know what I was thinking today as I was looking at those numbers from Red. Sorry, what is it? Red Bite.
It's Red Note.
Red Note. Sorry.
Red
Note.
How about Red Nose? You can remember that?
Right, Red Nose. Thank you. I was wondering if all of this movement is going to have an impact on TikTok, even if it doesn't close down. If 500,000 people, that's a drop in the bucket for TikTok, but nonetheless, if so many people have started to move, are people going to finally realize that when you put your stuff on someone else's platform, it could disappear at any moment?
Well, TikTok is also a global company, so America is not having it, and India has already done it, but many other countries still have it.
Wait.
And so
India
I think
it?
They banned it a long time ago.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So it's like I think one of the interesting things I saw was from, I want to say, an Australian who said, hey, this is the narrative that Americans have been having, is that we don't censor things like China and India, and we are not those people. And he says, what everyone else knows, you are those people. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot fueling the conversation. The one thing I thought was interesting that I put in our group was it hasn't been perfect for Red Note either. Yeah. Because all of a sudden these TikTok refugees, as they're telling them, have been welcomed in, but then they've also been saying, hey, this is our site. You have to have respect for where you're coming. And what the rules, like, people have been banned right away because the rules there are very different than the rules of TikTok. So there's lots of things that we allow on TikTok that we won't allow on Red Note. And so Red Note has said, well, we want all these people. So they've created kind of a American Red Note. So they've started to keep people who are, and this has been problematic for Chinese American citizens who are in America, or Chinese citizens who are in America, they can no longer access the Chinese side of Red Note. And so that is actually causing a real problem for their communication, because Red Note is the way that they keep in contact with their family and friends and their culture. Mm-hmm. So that, I think of that as a ESOL teacher. A lot of my students were from China. That would have been one of the conversations we'd be having, because that is how they connect.
Note for you, David, is that India had a problem with people fomenting riots and violence and murdering people on suspicion of behaviors. So they were putting stories into the TikTok saying, this man in this village, he's been taking the children, and masses of people would show up because they were all watching it. And they took matters into their own hands. So it happened so frequently and so widely spread that they decided one or two or three of these platforms have to be knocked out. So
yeah, here are some of these apps that we're dealing with, or the potentially. So there is Red Note, as you mentioned. There's Lemon 8. Now, Red Note is I believe, owned by the Chinese government explicitly. And in fact, I believe when you sign up for it, I could be wrong, I read this, you have to actually agree that you buy into communist ideals or whatever.
Which you were doing in Chinese.
Which you're doing in Chinese, so you don't know
There
you're
is
doing
no
it.
English version of that.
Right. So ignorance is bliss. There's Lemon 8, which is also owned by ByteDance, but not included in this the what do you call it? Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Control Applications app that they're passing. They had, in the first week of January alone, they had 10 million Google Play Store users, Lemon app, and it was the number one app in the Apple App Store the first week of January. Lemon 8 actually sounds like an interesting app. But Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, YouTube Shorts. There's no Clapper, apparently. There's no shortage of apps that can take its place. But
I am still holding out. I know MySpace will come back.
coming back. MySpace.
Bring
coming
back
back.
Periscope. Periscope.
Totally,
we need
though,
that.
those
Oh
places
my
are
gosh,
not
I remember
like
Periscope.
TikTok.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was Periscope, and then what was the Twitter version of that? Or was that the Twitter version? There
It was Periscope. Yeah.
But there was
It was
another one
Periscope.
that came out at the same time that, oh goodness, I don't remember.
Nope.
I remember when Periscope,
Obviously had a big impression on
it
us.
really, yeah, it was a very impressive app. All right, folks, I'm pushing us forward. Good 10-minute conversation. That was perfection. Let's talk about religious life in the digital age. First, let me just set the scene for a moment. So, a couple years ago, there were a number of Pew Research reports that looked at religious engagement and religious life and religious participation in America, including virtual religious services, apps, websites, all of that. And the study, I think, was born out of what happened to all of us with the COVID-19 pandemic. But the COVID-19 pandemic didn't just change things while the pandemic was active. It fundamentally shifted the way religion is practiced in America. And so what we wanted to do is look at some of these findings from the Pew Research and ask ourselves, are we actually seeing this in our own lives, in our own practices? And what have the lasting impacts been of technology on the way religion is practiced? I'll start with one example, and then I'll just let loose for everyone. So, online religious services. The Pew Research report said they are a complement, not a replacement. That a quarter of U.S. adults, about 27%, regularly watch online services, while a third regularly attend in person. 17 of U.S. adults do both. So still more people participating in person that never streamed before COVID. And since COVID, they've exploded with people watching online. There's one, for example, Central Synagogue. They had 500,000 people watch in some way, shape, or form over the High Holy Days in 2023. That's a number you never hear about in temples and synagogues. So let's make the rounds. What has your experience been? What have you seen changing and shifting in religious life in America with technology? Tony, can I put you on the spot?
Absolutely. I think I come from a interesting point of view from the standpoint that I'm a member of a church that probably has about 5,000 in-person membership, but I'm currently working with a congregation that is essentially 5 people for all intents and purposes. We have a fluctuation of maybe 10 to 15 on any given Sunday, but it is totally virtual. It's on Zoom, and the sermons are posted to YouTube. And this was a result of trying to get through the pandemic. The church that I'm a member of, with 5,000 plus members, has a history of sharing media with their members in the 90s. The way in which that was done was we started out doing cassette tapes, and we would send the entire services to our students who were in college, and we would send the cassette tapes to our members who were in military and those who were at home and were not able to come to worship experience. So that over the last 9 years, we have moved into a new structure where we have huge screens in the worship, in the house of worship, and we have a virtual ministry. Prior to the pandemic, we had 3 services. All of the latest technology were involved. And once the pandemic hit, we moved to just 1 service and an online service. The house of worship that I am basically working with was not able to have worship services in their building. And so they ended up starting out with a free service, and eventually we moved to Zoom, and we are now in Zoom, and we are in the process of building a building that will, the prayer is that it will be built and completed by the end of April. So it's I'm walking the line between this very technology advanced worship center and a group of people who are trying to be relevant and share their good news as they see fit with YouTube and Zoom.
Leo, when I first met you in office hours, you were setting temples up to do what Tony's talking about. I mean, you were outfitting them, you were teaching them how to do it. Are temples Jewish? Are they still looking for that? Are they still trying to figure out how to do this well? Is that still a thing?
So actually, we met before office hours. We actually met on a platform before that.
Oh my goodness,
only
you're right.
in a Jewish space.
Yeah, you're right.
we
The
did.
Synagogue Tech Forum. Yeah.
Yeah, Synagogue Tech. Yes, they are. I think we're now in the second or third generation of what they're doing, and this is where we're seeing that we went from an area where, as you said earlier, that there was very little involvement of technology. We moved to an area rapidly over COVID where technology became the forefront or became the driving force in certain areas. And now we're moving to an area where technology is blended into it rather than being either the primary or the secondary goal. And we're seeing what's the differences in that is that you went from an environment where a rabbi would talk to the people that are in front of them. Great. They all had a lot of experience, and most of them could talk for a very long time to the people in front of them. Then they went to an experience of having to stand and talk to a camera, and a lot of them couldn't do that, and they struggle. And now you're getting to that point where they're talking to both and including both, and it is a different way of doing it. And you suddenly see that the way that they're dealing with it is morphing. The use, and Tony mentioned things about the screens appearing in there, that you're now seeing, and this doesn't go across the board because there is certain denominations of synagogues that will not use technology, so that prohibits what we're talking about. But they're able to use it to enhance, and maybe it depends on your view of what people are experiencing. And that's what I also saw a lot happening in certain Christian environments in the UK as well, that they were enhancing and expanding the same way. Maybe what it very, very similar to how when PowerPoint first came out, we went from no PowerPoint to this, I wouldn't say the most ideal environment where every single slide seemed to disappear and reappear in 15 different ways. And now we get to the point where the PowerPoint is used, or equivalent, or Keynote to use to enhance the conversation rather than being the conversation. And I think that's where we are with synagogues.
So let's talk about whether technology is doing that. Is technology enhancing the experience? Because there's a big disconnect. One of the things the research found is that despite being able to participate in online services, people are feeling alone. Dave, you had mentioned that it's like when the mega churches offered drive-in services. There's a lingering sense that the technology has not given us that sense of connectedness that we get when we actually show up in our houses of worship, Dave.
In my city, a Pentecost group, congregation, built a church especially for television. It was a big pyramid, too. It was great. They had 3 cameras. They had a switching system and a sealed audio room. They had microphones, and wireless stuff was not quite the thing, so they had to have guys with mics that would hand them to people. And the music was played there and mixed together really well. And they put the show, their service, on Sunday morning television locally. And it was carried by the local TV station. So anybody who was hospitalized or otherwise could tune this thing in and be part of the celebration. It was a very successful group, and they had like a 5,500 person congregation. But I never ever heard what the ratings were, or whether, tens of thousands of people who weren't in the church were watching. I know that they had
It's funny
no
to think
ads.
about ratings for a church
It was
service.
part of the thing. Yeah. Well, this is almost what you guys have been talking about. I mean, you're very impressed 500,000 people tuned in, but did they have a religious experience? Did they get the same thing that you get when you're there, with everyone around you breathing at the same time and tuning in and mumbling even to themselves in response to what is coming at them and what message is on the schedule for the day? And singing together is a truly religious experience, and it's part of almost every, I don't know if the Quakers sing much, but a lot of celebrations that I've been to, and even the Hindus will sing. I've been to every church in Edmonton, sometimes with a camera. So I've been able to sit through a Sikh service and a Syrian service and all the other stuff that they do. The men sit on this side and the women on that side. It's the old way of doing things. And they don't care about the video, and they don't record it. They want you to be in the spot, sitting on the floor, cross-legged, getting the message. So.
Right. And so I think that there is a difference. I don't think anyone would deny there is a difference between the experience of being
But am I talking
room.
about this with my friends the next day, right? Am I gathering together with other people and then telling someone else what a great time I had last Sunday? I don't think that's happening.
But I think it's a lot of what we talk about in all hybrid events, right? When we came into COVID, though, people who didn't have church services and they threw a camera up, it was putting a camera in front of a static pastor, and now it's kind of evolved to, I can speak for my brother's church is really small, and it allows him to include people who would not normally be included. And so in that sense, it's really good. Is it fostering a relationship? Not necessarily. There are church platforms that do allow you to have an elder, for example, in the chats or in the chat and reminding people of making connection. And I feel like if you're going to expect people to not have a passive experience, then you really do have to rethink what you're doing for your digital audience to make those connections. You can have connection in digital spaces. We talk about that all the time, but it is not simply broadcasting to a space. It actually is figuring out how to foster that growth and foster that community.
So this is, I have the audio turned off, but this is the Central Synagogue that I mentioned. And now Central Synagogue, just so you know, is a huge synagogue with presumably millions upon millions of dollars to hire a whole
It's
team.
like the Mormon church. Yeah, it's very big.
I mean, and so they have these swooping shots and the big introductions and stuff. This is just the intro. And then they've got the cameras that they can zoom in and they can zoom out and all that other good stuff. All the different views. They have a whole band. They put on one heck of a show. It is one heck of a show. Now, it can be a spiritual show to watch. Here for me is the kicker, and the problem is that they don't know that I'm there. That as a watcher, as a participant, I want someone to know that I'm there. I want it to matter that I showed up. And maybe I feel that way because I've always been in religious services that are relatively small. I mean, the largest service that I've ever led had a couple thousand people in it, which is, relatively small, certainly for the big churches. And I knew the people who were there, and not every single person, but I knew the families that were there, and they knew that I knew that they were there, and that's why they were there. Like there was a connection that we made. With Central Synagogue, it's on YouTube. No, they have no idea if I'm actually watching. Now, one of the things that I haven't been on with them lately, so maybe they've changed it, but there's a Elevation Church. I don't know if you've ever heard of Elevation Church. They have the most amazing music. They have an unbelievable band. They've written some amazing songs that I walk around my house singing. They're so good. And they have an entire digital team, not the people who run the cameras, people who, they don't go to the service in the church. They go to the service online, and they're constantly chatting with people in YouTube and talking to them on Facebook and interacting. And then they reach out to people after the service, and they're doing, I mean, it's like a church within a church. And it's just stunning what they're able to do. We have not figured that out in the Jewish world yet. Sky, do you see that happening in your neck of the woods?
I think what we're missing here is the Church of Swift. Taylor Swift, of course, gathered how many millions of people collectively, made them feel good about themselves after spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to collectively be in a communal experience in a football stadium. She has been in more football stadiums than most NFL players will ever be, and got paid to be there handsomely, that she was gracious to share that benefit with the staff, as again, the press releases were happy to make sure that got out there, how good a person she is, which I'm not doubting she is. I'm old, so that comes, cynical and old are a synonym. So the challenge early days of COVID was, how do we stay connected? And I'm sorry, my blood runs in the Christian vein just simply because my dad was a Methodist preacher in Kansas, and the other option between raising wheat and being a Catholic was being a Methodist in Kansas.
We forgive you.
Yeah. And I know, being from Edmonton, I could see why you would harbor that fear, but the tornadoes coming after you. No, the connection that can happen in community through technology is what I had experienced when the blog came out, when the vlog came out, when the bulletin boards came out, because I had a people group that I had invested in a piece of hardware that the technology was failing me. And all of a sudden I could text somebody and I could see an answer show up in Australia. It would come down to South Africa. It would roll up. The answers would start coming in from England. Then you'd start hitting the East Coast and the Midwest. And so I had a problem that also. And were there to help me. So to your point of not being seen, I love this is that I'm on here with Tony, because at the beginning of COVID, he also felt a calling to reach out to humanity with whatever means possible. And so the horse and the cart were in the right order, because he wasn't saying we all have to go to a channel. We all have to be connected, and we're going to use whatever channel we can grab a hold of right now. Yeah. And this is where, Tamara, your comment that you're seeing the best in humanity come out after a devastating disaster is, I believe, the human spirit. That's the spark I want to blow on. So the feeling that we get from being collectively together, songs are a rhythmic thing that beat to the heart, that move the mind. So yeah, quick side note, somebody said that music's horrible because it wasn't what I learned when I came to faith. Well, because it has this emotional attachment. Music has an emotional attachment. So yeah, it's not what when you had that emotional experience of believing in a being or creator greater than yourself. That's a pretty traumatic experience, right? So is technology the savior of the world? No, and I think that's where we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree, because I think that I've seen technology in different ways, right? We've seen my church go from traditional services to where in the 80s we started adding contemporary services and adding music. And I think like what you're talking about, David, is almost like a Zoomtopia of church, right? And so that would make you feel better, but it would not make some of the people who have an in-person experience feel better. And I think that the thing about dealing with congregations and with churches, I mean, I even know when we added screens to the front, there are people who absolutely will not look at the screen. They have to hold that hymnal. Or when we printed the music in the bulletin as opposed to using the order of service, that's a real dramatic change for people who've been in the church for a long time. And our church congregants are older. That's why I think for me, the first status would be to treat the online congregation as a congregation and meet their needs where they are in this technical area. They chose to be there, but also find ways to make community and connection, and then find a way to slowly introduce it. I think by making churches just places where it's all about technology, and I say that as someone who loves technology, we have to honor the people who are showing up in person and what they need in order to worship. And that is for some of them, not technology.
I remember the first time, Leo, I'm going to come to you in just a second and then back to Tony, but early on, I wanted to do the service in Zoom. So I lead every month. I lead I don't lead services regular anymore, but one month I do a service, and we do it on Zoom. It's just Zoom. That's it. And early on, I wanted to try and use some of these different tools like spatial chat or wonder.me, some of these more spatially aware meeting tools where, if I move my avatar closer to Leo, then I could hear him. But if I move it closer to Sky, then I lose. And so what we did is we had our service in Zoom, and then I popped the link in Zoom to this spatial chat thing that I had created, which looked like a social hall in a synagogue, and we were all gonna do what we call after services kiddush. We're gonna have kiddush, right, where we have a little meal and whatever. And I ended the Zoom, and I went in there, and I sat there for a half an hour all by myself. No one came, because the app that the website I was using wasn't mobile friendly. And I hadn't bothered to think about the fact that the people that I'm serving, they're all watching this on an iPad. None of them sitting in front of a computer with lights and a microphone. They have their phone or their iPad open. And so none of them could even, so being aware of where our congregants are and how we can best serve them is yeah, you just brought that back for me. I want to go.
It also takes direct instruction.
Absolutely.
It takes direct
Absolutely. Yeah.
instruction. It's not something that everybody can come and play. And so there's a gravitating people towards that technology where then community and connection can happen.
I want to go back to Taylor Swift, though. Now, Leo, for you, it's not music, but you worked in sports for such a long time. And I mean, that's another very religious place, if you will, a place of deep connection and really, strong feelings. What parallels are you drawing?
So in the last year, I've been to the Olympics. I've been to the FA Cup final, which is the big UK sports event. I've been to I was at Miami Dolphins, in fact, in just over a year ago. And attending in person is an experience, a very, very different experience to the attending an event in a digital environment. And by that, I include television these days. Is it wrong? No. Is it different? Yes. And this is where I always sit with this. I think sometimes we have to sit here and say, we shouldn't be trying to say which one is right and which one is wrong, which one is the authentic experience. You watch Monday Night Football in America and tell me that is not the authentic experience that the people want to watch. That's a really hard thing to say. People want an experience that they get used to. Tamara brought up a very good point. You know, when you try and change that experience that happens in the environment that you're in, people initially can be very reluctant to it. When we brought in big screens into stadia, people are like, hold on, what's happening? And the worst thing actually we had in the UK is that they didn't know how to use them. They were so scared about showing replays of what was happening on the pitch in case that would cause issues in the people watching would actually riot because they saw exactly what happened. There's a very famous, in my mind, example of this, which is the World Cup final in football, where one player headbutted another. Everybody around the world knew what happened. The people who paid the most amount of money, who were sitting in the stadium, never knew what actually happened at the time. And so you've got to sit there and look at how this technology works.
Fascinating.
So
yes.
Yeah.
I think
because they couldn't see it.
I think it's a really, they couldn't see it. They couldn't see it. So they didn't know. In reverse, and this is something that for my environment, one of the things that people love most when we do an installation at a synagogue is we will provide, in a lot of cases, what we would call a Torah cam. And a Torah cam is a camera that's located above, so that when they are actually reading the Torah, which is the scroll that you'll see, you can see into it. Now, up until that point, literally, with the exception of who was reading and the rabbi, nobody else knew what was actually being seen to be read. They were just assuming that somebody was reading from there. And that changed. In a lot of synagogues, they have now they now change it so that the cameras are then shown on the screen in the actual room. So you then went exactly as I just said. The people at home had a better view than the people in the room. And now now you're getting to the point where those views are being joined together, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it makes sense. Yeah, it one of the things that has been most important to me from the shift that we all went through was not only how can we do digital spiritual experiences well, but also how can digital spiritual experiences impact, influence, and teach us about how to do better in-person experiences. And like you just said, you know, if someone who's never seen the inside of a Torah scroll, to be able to put that up on a screen so they can actually follow along as the person is reading, that's incredibly powerful to me. Tony, you mentioned that you have this relatively small group that you're ministering to and serving, but then there's the much larger church. Has there been a lot of movement? Like did a whole bunch of, obviously everybody was online during the pandemic, but then did all those people leave the online experience and go back to in person?
So what I would say is that the larger congregation has moved from 3 services a day to on Sunday to 1 service and an online service that is simultaneous. And as Tamara was saying, there was engagement. There is a person, a minister that is in the chat, and that minister responds to any of the requests for prayer. There is also evangelism that goes on in the chat. People are able to participate in new member orientation in person or online. And so it doesn't matter where you live, because if you are in the Atlanta area, you're able to come to the service and be fully engaged in the experience. Or if you're online, there is a minister. And even prior to us having ministers, the church was such of a size that even before we moved into the new sanctuary, the deacons ministry were assigned so many members of the congregation, because it was not possible for the pastor, although he did a fantastic job of knowing everybody in that large congregation. But each person, each family had a specific deacon that they could go to for any needs that they had. And if need be, then their particular request would be relayed to the pastor. And so there has always been this sense of community, even though it's a large congregation. Now, the small congregation that I'm working with, well, let me just say this. The larger congregation is 150 years old. The smaller congregation is in its 43rd year, and it had lost a lot of its members when the pandemic hit, and they were no longer able to be in the sanctuary. So I'm just going to say it, make it plain, in that there are several individuals who have maintained a steadfast connection to making sure that the work of the small church continues. And so, as I said, they are in the process of building a new building, and we expect that some of those who have gone, for lack of a better word, by the wayside will return once there is a new building to come to. Now, the smaller church does intend to have hybrid worship services. And so I am trying to support them to put in place the infrastructure that is needed to do the hybrid worship services well. And so I can only make suggestions. But what I want to say is that when you mentioned Periscope, or when Periscope was mentioned, I was thinking about what came before Periscope, and that was Meerkat and Blab.
Meerkat is what I was thinking of. Yeah.
And so those, I was able to glean relationships in those 2 platforms. Some of the way in which I really got to office hours were because some Meerkat and Blab members, John Preto and Paul Wallace and some others that were a part of that community, reached out, and seeing Alex Lindsay on MacBreak Weekly and those kinds of things, that got me into office hours. But what I want to say is that technology is a tool. And if that tool is used in a way that is productive, that is provides an outlet for engagement, then you have something that is very meaningful. I want to say that I have authentic, real friends that I have never met because of the authenticity of their presence in a video streaming service. I can start naming names and you will all know these names.
Amen.
And I can tell you that some of them I have actually had the pleasure of meeting. Why is that possible in a digital format? It has to do with the efforts of the community in order to represent the best that they can do in terms of interacting with one another. So if, in fact, you are doing that, and if you're doing that in a context of, one of our questions was, what is the definition of religion? Some could say that there is a religion of office hours, from the standpoint that people work hard to make sure that they engage with one another.
Tony, can I just can I highlight something you just said? First of all, thank you for that. But what I just heard you say, which is different than I think the way a lot of religious leaders think. A lot of religious leaders think to themselves, we understand we have to do this better, so we're going to invest the money and we're going to do this and we're going to work on it. And that's all important and great. But what you just talked about was not just the leaders taking responsibility, but the participants also feeling how important it is to be engaged in a meaningful, serious way. Office hours, it wasn't just Andy Carluccio who showed up looking good on screen. We all wanted to, and because
Absolutely.
we all were dedicated to that, that I think is what made the and continues to make the experience.
You're allowed to jump in, Sky.
Yeah, you just gotta start talking, Sky.
Just start talking.
Yeah, it makes it even more meaningful. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I've had the opportunity of being in a people group gathering. Some people call it a church service because that's what a church is people, the buildings. But the people that did not have the use of these things were up there. Somebody was able to do American Sign and translate what was happening in a language that had been a system that somebody had devised, that somebody had learned, that they had all collectively, and that was their communications and then consequently connection, right? Through that sign language. And I think technology is what we're using now to stay connected, and it's a language. But not everybody, and I think we heard examples of that. The language is not something that everybody can speak. You were talking about your cool new tool that was completely irrelevant because everybody is watching it on a map or iOS. The next thing I want to say before I have to jump off, I'm going to be here another 5 minutes. A 10,000 size congregation in Manila, Philippines. I got to perform in this theater company I was with, and we did a play that was in Tagalog and English at the same time. It was a uniquely amazing experience. Probably 8,000, there were 5,000 people in the facility of a 10,000. And they said the secret was home church. And he had also participated with all of these other mega churches from Seoul, Korea to South Africa to England and he said, that's their success, is that you need to be connected in this minor way, this small group way. You need to be accountable, responsible, have an accountability partner, a connection physically. So I love Tony's. I was back here going, preach it, brother, preach it.
I think that's such a good point Tony brought in, though, because if you have ever had the unfortunate time of being in a church where the congregation doesn't know that they're the church and their expectation is that the pastor is doing everything, it feels drastically different.
That is such a
It does
Jewish
not
what you just
feel
described is such a Jewish
connected.
experience.
And that's where the generations.
That is the struggle of that's the struggle of the church. Is that if the church doesn't know that they're the church, then and they only expect it to be the pastor, you could be in an incredibly religious service that doesn't feel connected.
Okay, wait a second.
So
I've got a great. Wait, I'm coming back to you, Leo, because this is sports. Ready? So I've talked about Jewish worship services like a football game, right? So what is a football game? In a football game, you've got 20 guys on the field who don't really need exercise, sweating like exercising. You've got 20,000 people in the stands who probably do need exercise watching them. In a synagogue service, you've got two people up on the stage, the rabbi and the cantor, who really don't need spiritual exercise, and they're working their tuchas off. And then you've got 20 or 200 people in the pews who really do need to be doing that work, just sitting there watching. Right. So that's it. I mean, Tony, I really think that you kind of nailed it here. That if these experiences can work when we all take them seriously, participate in them, and take them and have some ownership of them. Leo, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think also one of the things I was going to say about Tony, about his experience and what he was talking about, is there is a difference and the things diverge. We in the UK, when we're talking about our football, we get big.
I forgot that
clubs.
I should have.
I know,
yeah,
but it's
sorry.
It's a religious question.
It is.
It's a religious discussion. We have big clubs that will they will do the investment in the technology, and then you'll find that some fans will turn around and say, we don't like that, we want to go to a smaller club, a non-league club, to get that authentic experience. So when Tony was talking about the two different ways that the smaller churches are going into an environment, I'm not sure the smaller church has to sit there and invest in that technology. That isn't why people are in the room with that smaller church. In the reverse, there are, as you talked about Central Synagogue, there are a lot of people that will join a service that could be anywhere in the world. They could be in Buenos Aires in Argentina to be watching a service that has been happening in somewhere else in the world. And I think you've got to sit there and say, this technology is there for the experience that you want to drive. And if you use the technology correctly, and if you use the technology as the enabling force, then you end up providing the tools that people want. That's why we have in the film industry, why they've increased the technology that they use as the special effects that you don't see in the theatre. That doesn't mean to say that the theatre isn't right and isn't an authentic experience for people who want to watch the theatre rather than want to watch a movie.
I think
If I could,
that small group model that Sky was talking about.
Tamara,
if you
hold on one second,
Yep.
I'm supposed to say goodbye to Sky. Sky, thank you.
Bye, Sky.
Love you. See you later.
Ironically, I'm going to a worship and arts meeting, so I'm going to be doing this just in a
One more
conference
time.
because Presbyterians loves to do.
they
committees.
do.
The two words I want to leave you with are faith and faith-based organizations, but also what is a faith community? And I think that's the delineation between the Taylor Swift and the football. And the last part of that is I think this is where the horse and the cart get confused, is tradition.
Mm.
And that can either be a really good thing because it's foundational,
Right.
or it can be the thing that you end up worshiping and just puts the cart in front of the horse. And that's my rant. Okay.
Bye.
Love you guys.
Go ahead, take
Next
it.
week?
Go ahead, take it, Tamara.
No, I also belong to a bigger church that uses that small group model where they really try to they minister to people in smaller groups so that when they're in a service with 3,000 people, they're not by themselves. And I think that if you treat your online community also as a small group and you minister not just in the service, but in other ways, like I've noticed my brother has been doing some combined both online and in-person Bible studies, which is a small group And, he's had 2 or 3 people online and 2 or 3 people in the room with him. But now they're able to be connected in that way that they would not have been if you were just online or just in person.
Wait, so Tamara, because I think, well, I'm not going to speak for you all. I rail against hybrid experiences. I don't think they work. I think fundamentally, because we are biological beings, we are naturally drawn to other biological human beings that are in our proximity, which means that we pay more attention to the folks who are in the room than we do to the people that are not. And that's not a flaw, that's just biology.
I normally agree with that 110%. That's why I'm saying you should have your small group is also your digital space. Here's where it makes a difference. In his community, these are people who know each other, who've grown together as a community. So then when they're joining together, they are real people in real life. But what's coming into the meeting is maybe someone who can't come back to church because they are no longer able to join the group.
Yeah.
So in that case, you now are connecting people who can't come to church anymore with people who can come to church for whatever reason. And then that is that community. But again, that community, he walked into a church where the community was strong to begin with.
Right.
So that's where your nurturing of your community is, I know a pastor who, the second I walked in New York, he was like, "Hi, it's so nice to meet you. Have you met Donna?" And immediately, and I watch his digital service every week because now he's in Houston and I'm in Los Angeles. But I think that, again, it is about connecting and it is about making community. So how you bring people in your digital space. Now, they have the least amount of technology. This is not office hours. This is we're going to sit in front of us, 4 in front of the computer, and we've got one mic that everybody can hear from. And it's acceptable to that community because they so want to worship with the people on that screen, and they'd rather do that than not.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Tony, you wanted to jump in before.
Yeah, I was really wrestling with a lot of different things. So I'm a person who, for all intents and purposes, missed almost the entire year last year, being in the hospital rehab, and then in a hospital bed in my home. And so my experience, even with both congregations, was that I was able to engage with both of them, even though I was in the situation that I was in. And for me, the understanding of what the church is might be a little bit different than most people, from the standpoint that I understand very clearly that the church, for me, is the people. The building is a place in which they gather, but the church is the people, whether it's a large congregation or a small congregation. And when you understand that the people are the church, then you should operate in a different way. Now, I'm going to step out on a limb right here, and David and everyone here can chop my head off. I think that a healthy church is a church that has 3 different segments of people as a part of it. You have your elders, you have your parents that with children, and you have the children or the youth. If you don't have those 3 groups, you don't have a healthy church. The reason I bring this up is because for most of the Protestant people that I interact with, the membership is off. People are not coming to church. And there's a reason why they're not coming to church. I don't know all of the reasons, But one of the reasons is that for them, it does not speak to them. So I understand very clearly that I am of age that most of my peers are in a very traditional kind of worship experience, and they want it a particular kind of way, and they don't want all of this celebration and loud music and all of that. Okay. But I understand very clearly that if you don't have something that pulls in that middle group and pulls in that youth, you have a dying church.
And by the way,
You have a
Tony,
dying church.
And by the way, I would another thing that we're not going to have time to get into, but another piece that the Pew studies talk about is the role of social media in religion, because that's where those young people are, right? And that's how they engage
Absolutely.
with even big
The
things like
outside world,
religion.
yeah.
And so churches, synagogues, mosques that can do that well, that's also a part of building that church. Leo, go ahead.
Sure.
Can I just say
First of all,
one
listening-
quick thing?
I don't know. We don't
Let
have
me just
much
say
time.
one quick thing. So, David, when you said social media, this is a problem. And the problem is that people of my generation and most of the churches are on Facebook. The young people are not there. They're on TikTok.
Right.
Okay. So
Right.
I'm going to cover, first of all, listening to Tony is always amazing.
Right.
The point I'm going to say, though, there's 2 or 3 reasons for what you're actually saying there, Tony. First of all, there's a migration. People move. And this is one of the biggest problems we have with synagogues. And I know they have a similar problem in churches. The elders are based where the church is. Their kids can't afford to live there. They've moved to somewhere else, and the new generation are moving on and on. So the church has to up, stick, and move. And then digitally, this is something that's happening as well. So I would also say that you don't necessarily want the church to have the same environment on Facebook that you want it to have on TikTok. It's a different end. First of all, Facebook users, we have an attention span of lasts at least a minute and a half. TikTok users, maybe 5 seconds. They're just a different generation and a different way of dealing with it. And one of the things that, coming back to the sports side, is that sports clubs were putting in and have put in social media managers. When they have done that, and that person isn't of the generation that matches the environment and the people who are using that technology, there is a disconnect. And then they're suddenly sitting there going, why aren't we, but I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I think we've got to be very careful for a church or for any religious environment to move forward. It has to move forward using the technology in a way that it embraces that technology, but not imply or put on its values of how it uses an older technology onto the new technology. And that's something that it has to do to make it so that it's relevant to the people that use it.
I think it speaks to having goals for what you want
I'm coming to
what
you next,
you're
Dave. Hold on.
intending.
Tamara's
right?
up, and then
It's-
you, Dave.
It's exactly what you're saying, is that it's setting goals for what you want to achieve. And I think that's where, when we came on in Zoom, we jumped into Zoom, and the sheer purpose was like, let's connect any way that we can. And we are 5 years out, and we need to be connecting in ways that are 5 years out, that have intention, and that use technology in the way to meet the needs of whatever field you're in.
Yeah.
Dave,
Dave, go ahead.
your turn.
I've been quiet longer than I usually am in my own
I'm
home.
very proud of you.
I'm going to leave you with Taylor Swift. I thought it was appropriate that Sky brought that up. She does run a big community, and they are devoted to each other, not just to her. They support each other in all levels, and she works very hard to make sure that they know she's paying attention to them. Like you said, David, she wants to let them know she sees them. Through the pandemic, I came across Epiphany by Taylor Swift, and it's been my theme song ever since. And it is essentially my religious experience whenever I want to plug into that. I can play that once a week, and I've gone to church. So there you go.
Wait a second. Epiphany by Taylor Swift? I didn't know. Now I have to look it up. I'm not much. Look at that. She has a song called Epiphany. Keep your helmet, keep your life, son. Just a flesh wound. Here's your rifle. Wow. With you I serve, with you I fall down, down. Watching you breathe in, watching you breathe out, out. Interesting. Yeah, she wrote that.
I
it's just
dare
the
you to
modern-day
listen to
Leonard
it.
Cohen. That's all you've got to listen to.
I am going to listen to it.
Oh, Leonard Cohen,
I'm not going to
that
play it here
brings me
because
to tears too.
they'll take
Yeah.
us right down. But
That's right.
yeah.
No, just each of you. I just challenge you to listen to it on Spotify if you have it, or
Yeah.
download it and listen,
you're
because it's
you're
quite an
preaching to the
experience.
choir here. I mean, music is
I am preaching, yeah.
absolutely lots of different music is absolutely a core component of religious experience. I mean, if you've
I don't know if you guys know much about Mormons, but they claim that any music is from God.
yeah.
Like, doesn't matter what rap, every kind of music there is, jazz, doesn't matter. Even if it's like off kilter electronic noise, they think it's channeled, and that's why they can dance to it, and their kids are allowed. If you want to keep the church alive, throw a lot of dances.
I agree. Got to have more fun in synagogue and church. I'm so grateful to all of you for staying up late with me and talking this through. Leo, especially for someone who's, what is it, 4 in the morning now? 3 in the morning?
3:13 in the morning.
You really need to
After
go to bed.
flying
right?
just thinking-
in 8 o'clock, I landed.
Oh, you
Take
you
the day
landed
off,
at 8.
Leo.
Ay, ay, ay. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Leo, for being here and being a part of this. Tony, what a gift to have you on today. Please come back. You are always, always welcome on the rundown.
Thank you,
This is
David.
really, really lovely.
Enjoyed being here.
Good. And Dave, as always, stay warm up there, and thank you for all that you contribute. And my dear friend Tamra, I'm so blessed to be here with you, and thank you so much for your time tonight. Folks, another wonderful rundown. I'm so grateful for all of you for being a part of it. We will look forward to seeing you next week for another rundown. Have a good week, everyone.